All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 62 of the Blowback Roundtable. Our extra special guest this week is journalist and author Daniel Lazar. He is coming from New York City. That's not a fancy studio. That's an actual live shot. Uh, we also have our co-host Ben Toth from Pécs, Hungary. We have Carlo Parcelli from Washington D.C. And our episode this morning is entitled Dancing on the Bones of Gaza. So I was going to ask Ben to explain a little bit about where that title comes from.
Today, that was in the Palestine Chronicle. That those are the words apparently of Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, and it's about this pier, pontoon bridge, mobile pier that the U.S. is building, in order to get aid in. So that's where the title comes from. So it's a Gaza Israel themed episode.
So obviously the two big news stories are Gaza and Ukraine. Those are the two big news stories. I would like to start off and just listening to Daniel give us his take on the Gaza situation, if that's okay, Dan.
Sure.
It's kind of broad and open-ended, but I would love to hear your take.
Well, it's horrible. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. It is a major political defeat for the Palestinian people, for the anti-Zionist movement, for the left in general. We've been wrestling with this problem for generations, and now what's the result? The result is we're seeing utter catastrophe. A lot of people are calling this Nakba 2, Nakba 1 being the expulsion of the Palestinians that occurred in 1947 to 48. But it's really not. It's really not Nakba 2. It's Nakba squared. This is the greatest disaster to befall the Palestinian people in the history of the modern Palestinian movement. And I think that the problem with the left is that there is a complete and total failure to address the real reasons for this catastrophe. Everybody's happy to discuss Israel, and that's good because Israel is an expansionist, racially chauvinist, supremacist state, which rains down destruction on its neighbors on a near daily basis. So that's and also is clearly represents an outgrowth of Western imperialism in the Middle East. So that's really important to come to grips with that and to sort of discuss Israel's Zionism's checkered history when it comes to issues like anti-Semitism. But the other side of the coin, which almost no one on the left is discussing, is Hamas. And the fact is that what we're seeing now is the after effects of Hamas's massive self-inflicted defeat. Hamas lost the war nearly the moment it launched its October 7th Al-Aqsa flood operation. It succeeded in wrapping the tiger smartly on the nose, but what it failed to do, or even worse, what it really didn't care about, is what the tiger would do once it recovered its senses. And the answer to that is the tiger would go berserk. And what we're seeing now is the consequences of that. We're seeing, bunker buster bombs raining down on a helpless population for months on end. I think the death count is now at 32,000. I'm sure, no doubt, it'll go many times higher. And there's nothing the left can do. We are reduced to utter impotence. I was utterly beside myself when a Hamas leader named Ghazi Hamad gave an interview in late October uh, on a Beirut TV station, in which he declared, declared quite proudly, "We are a nation of martyrs," and vowed to conduct many more October 7 style operations. So it's utterly bizarre because it suggests that what he is seeking out is the martyrdom of the Palestinian people, and something that the Israelis are all too happy to deliver. Uh, there's a British Marxist, I mean quasi-Marxist journal called the Socialist Workers' Party, which publishes the Socialist Worker in Britain. It compared October 7th to the Tet Offensive launched by the Vietnamese communists in 1968. But the comparison is completely off base because the Tet Offensive is the product of a really acute political analysis of the world situation. And while the North Vietnamese lost in strictly military terms, they won in political terms because the U.S. realized at that moment that the war was unwinnable and it had to get out. So, politically, politically speaking, it was a huge victory. But Hamas has done the opposite. Hamas was hoping that to ignite a general Islamic uprising that would come to the Palestinians' rescue, but absolutely nothing of the sort has happened. Yeah, it's true the Houthis are firing off a few drone missiles in the other end of the Red Sea, but it's not amounting to very much. Hezbollah has been quiet, relatively quiet. And a few weeks ago, according to the New York Times, Iran, supposedly the center of the resistance, called a war council involving Hezbollah, the Houthis, and various pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, called them together and said, "Cool it. We don't want a war. Enough with this kind of provocative, actions." So I see failure all around. I see the Palestinians paying the price, and I see a general reluctance on the part of the left to face facts. And this, to me, is just so dangerous. I can't believe it.
So, would you say the left is, not willing to face the facts? What specific facts are we talking about? Just the situation that you laid out there.
That Hamas lost the war. It launched a catastrophically misconceived operation that has resulted in complete and total defeat and the most horrifying payback for the Palestinian population itself. I mean, these people. I mean, not only are there 30, I think it's 32,000 deaths at this point, and probably 3 times that number of wounded. And of course, we know that probably 2/3 of the total are women and children. This is just beyond comprehension. But even the survivors. I mean, as Khrushchev once said about nuclear war, the living will envy the dead. I mean, the survivors are living in tent cities, in horrendous circumstances with no hygiene, no food, no medicine, prey to starvation and disease. This is just beyond belief. But this is what defeat looks like. And when if a general goes out and suffers, and sort of marches ahead into a total catastrophic defeat, he's lucky if he merely gets fired. Oftentimes he'll wind up against the wall. So why aren't we demanding the same thing of Hamas? Why hasn't Hamas been fired? Why hasn't a new leadership taken its place?
Because that's okay. Let me be your normal Finkelstein for this show. We've both seen a recent debate that you guys had, very informative. But what would you say to the people of Gaza who are more supportive of Hamas than they were in the beginning? And you mentioned they pricked the tiger or some thing like not expecting the genocide, which is every bit as real as you described. It's horrific. I mean, you get aid drops one day and bombs the very same place the next day. It's absolutely horrific. But what would you say to someone if they said, this is exactly the point? It was to show the world how horrible this genocidal occupation actually is, in which they have succeeded, both in economic terms and in diplomatic terms. I think the last Arab ally, as in functioning diplomatic ties, is the UAE that Israel still has. And I think Qatar and the BP, the British major concern, they both broke like a $2 billion deal with Israel this week because it's becoming untenable. What would you say to an opinion like that?
Is a $2 billion deal worth 38,000 deaths?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't point it that way. But from the point of view of Hamas showing the world what Israel is, did they not succeed in that?
No, they did not. I mean, I think first of all, number one is that the atrocities on October 7th, which were very real, and innocent people were killed. I think that that essentially that cast Hamas in a very poor light. It showed that it's not really interested in any kind of peaceful coexistence with the Israeli people, and I think that it compromised it, to say the least, morally, and it made any kind of settlement absolutely impossible. I mean, I just am beside myself because I think what we see here is a death spiral. And by the way, the military outlook for the Israelis is not good, but they're both locked in a death spiral. They both have their hands on the other's throat. Neither can afford to let go. And at this point, the Israelis are obviously the stronger of the two by a factor of 20 or 30 to 1. So the Israelis will wind up strangling the Palestinians before the Palestinians wind up strangling the Israelis, even whether that is whether that is a desirable outcome.
Well, what do you say to people that say that the Palestinians have tried everything?
Yeah.
2 intifadas. They're shooting people. The Israelis are shooting people in wheelchairs. They're shooting children. They're shooting journalists, medics. In the Intifada, which was the last one, was a peaceful attempt to just simply go to the fence, and there was nothing else left to jar this thing loose. Otherwise, it's like people point out that some of these guys, many of these guys, most of these guys in Hamas that went into Israel were in their 20s. They spent their entire life in this ghetto, in this jail, and they can't see their way out, and the frustration just builds to that point. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean that's all quite true. I mean, Hamas. What's remarkable about Gaza is that it has never been subdued since 1947 or 48. Hamas has been a hotbed of anti-Zionist rebellion for ever since then, and efforts to suppress it have completely failed. I totally, I think that rebellious spirit is absolutely correct. It's commendable. The refusal of the Gazans to bow down to Israeli oppression, I think, is worthy of celebration. But rebellion has got to be smart. And what Hamas did was really, really stupid. And let me just be very clear.
I'm with you. I'd like to hear about the smart resistance that you described. What would that look like?
That's totally fair. I mean, this essentially is original Comintern policy, the Comintern being the Communist International. And the Comintern policy, and as outlined by Lenin and Trotsky in many, many writings, is simply... Pardon me?
Sorry, there was a question from a viewer. Do you write for the New York Times? And I answered, I don't know. Sorry.
No, I do not write for the New York Times. I have written in the distant past, but I do not write now for the Times.
Yeah. Excuse me, listening.
The policy is to call for freedom and independence and national development for all colonial peoples and equality, first and foremost. I mean, Palestinians have the right to be treated on the same basis as all other nations, with the same rights of development and freedom and progress. But that can only, as Lenin and Trotsky stressed on many occasions, that can paradoxically that cannot be achieved through a policy under the policy of their own native bourgeoisie, but can only be achieved through international socialism, in which the Palestinians take their place as part of a socialist community of nations, an international community of nations, and that means that the highest value is working class unity, and far-fetched as it seems, that means working class unity with Israeli workers, and it means, above all, not slaughtering Israeli workers in their beds or at rock concerts, but it means engaging in joint strike action, and joint working class actions aimed at combating anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian racism, separating church from state, fighting religious fundamentalism on all sides, fighting for secularism, fighting for education, fighting for women's rights, etc. But it means doing so jointly, not as part of some bloody ethnic reprisal. And bloody ethnic reprisals are suicidal for the Palestinians, first and foremost. I mean, as much as I mourn the hundreds of Israeli citizens who were killed on October 7th, I mourn even more the tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been killed since October 8th.
I come from a different school of the left, to say it that way. I don't agree with everything you said, but we are here to get your perspective, Daniel. So I'm appreciative of that.
I mean, it sounds to me a little bit of idealism, because we live in a real world, and I mean, ideally, of course, I totally agree with that. But the problem is reality, and reality just isn't conducive to that kind of thing. And the reality is the only real option the Palestinians have is to violently resist their dispossession, because the diplomacy is a dead end, right? International law isn't being abided by. And so in a way it was this is a resistance operation that is gruesome and awful because of innocent lives being taken. But I mean, from the Palestinian perspective, like every day they're dealing with that that being done to them by the Israel state. So, I have a little bit of optimism regarding the whole situation, because it's untenable. The United States as the global hegemon is not going to last in perpetuity. And eventually the United States isn't going to be able to afford to keep Israel the, apartheid, racist state that it is. It's going to have to break up and give way and either allow, equality for everyone in Palestine, or it's going to be, they're going to have to leave. So, the global forces, with the ascendance of Russia and China and the decrease in the power of the United States, is something that is a positive development, on the planet. And I don't think the U.S. will be able to continue to maintain these imperialist outposts in perpetuity. And I think it could be just a few more years. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
All right.
yeah. I'm sorry.
I would like to extend like a kind of compromise, an olive branch. I would like to ask your opinion on Russia's involvement, who, as you know, I think they have PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as well as Hamas, as well as Fatah, right, the Palestinian Authority in Moscow. And they are trying to form a kind of unified, like get the what do you call it, disagreements out of the way and form a unified political Palestinian movement in Moscow. Would you agree with that approach? I ask.
No, not really. I mean, first of
Why
all,
not?
first of all, let me say that I
Okay.
am all in favor of reality myself. I think that reality is not going away. We can't ignore it. We can't close our eyes. The trouble is that diplomacy, this beyond farcical two-state solution, uh, all other means are even more unrealistic than international socialist revolution. That's the problem. The problem is that no one has a way out, and the problem is that October 7th, closes off any and all exits, except that of socialist revolution. I mean, I don't. I mean, and I think unification talks among Islamic Jihad and Hamas. It will do nothing as long as they are committed to a policy of war with the Israeli state, which, as I said before, overpowers them by a ratio of 20 or 30 to 1. That there is no military solution. This is what decades of history have shown us. The military gap between Israel and its neighbors has only opened up wider and wider. I mean, tell me, am I wrong, Ben? Can you have any evidence to the contrary?
At this moment, I'd say you are, because just this week there was news. The Financial Times of London reported that the US was desperately, secretly in Oman talking to Iranian representatives to finally come and help them out of the situation in the Red Sea. And that is just the Houthis, as in basically sorry, there's a bit of wind on in New York.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. It's basically the armed forces of Yemen have shown the big US aircraft carriers, the fantastic rocket destroyers, are worth nothing. And this was after a couple of months after they asked China to do the same. And it seems both of them told the US to fuck off and so solve their own problems. And that is just them. That's not Iran. And just this week there was, I think, RIA Novosti, so a Russian news outlet, broke the news. I don't quite know where to put it yet, but there's hypersonic Houthis now. I mean, there's 3 nations in the world capable of sending hypersonic missiles. That is Russia, Iran, and China. And apparently, somehow the Houthis have joined them. Would you say the Americans, who have bombed them for over 2 weeks, do you say the American fleet looks like it's winning?
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, I think the Houthis are happy to keep sending drones to at various ships passing through the Red Sea, and the U.S. is happy to keep firing missiles off at Houthi emplacements.
It's a finite resource, those missiles, and they're worth a lot more than a Houthi drone.
No,
it's not finite.
It's ultimately finite, yes, but the U.S. has got lots of missiles. Listen, I'm second to none. I mean, I've actually written numerous times about the Houthi war. They are scrappy fighters. They essentially defeated the Saudis, and the Saudis
US,
the Saudis were acting as proxies for the U.S. No doubt about it, in Britain. So their fighting capabilities are not to be underestimated. But I don't see this as anything more than an annoyance. As far as the U.S. is concerned, I think that Joe Biden is not losing sleep over these attacks.
I don't. Yeah, I think Joe Biden is fine, but on the other hand, Netanyahu, whose ports, basically went out of business couple of months ago.
Listen, I think that Al-Sisi in Egypt is worrying more about the Houthi attacks, since they are depriving him of a major source of revenue.
True.
And the fact that Iran, which is, as I said before, supposedly the center of the resistance, that Iran is trying to avoid conflict, because the funny thing about Iran is that Iran is the one country in the Middle East where you find significant pro-Israeli sentiment. This is amazing.
A huge Jewish minority in Iran as well. Yeah.
Is it huge? I thought it was only a few tens of thousands.
I thought, compared to the neighbor, as well as Syria, compared to the neighbors, those two have the largest minority Jewish population.
But the fact that Iran is doing its best to avoid war, the fact that the Hezbollah, is trying to avoid a conflict, and Syria. I mean, we've got to face facts about the crisis of the Islamic world. This is quite real. We see in that portion, we see throughout the Middle East a series of broken states. Lebanon is bankrupt. Syria. I wrote many articles attacking the U.S., Saudi, British, French assault on Syria in the teens. I was absolutely outraged. That was one of the great crimes of the 21st century, and the 21st century is just beginning. So I'm sure there'll be many more. But that assault left Syria so broken, so depleted, that even though Israel has bombed them hundreds of times, Syria is unable to respond. Egypt is destitute. Algeria, Libya is now a war zone. It's really, and of course the Gulf states are these obscene rentier states whose influence in the Middle East is absolutely pernicious. So we've got to deal with this. We've got to deal with these issues, and we've got to understand that the region as a whole is broken, that any kind of hope of a military victory over Israel is completely mistaken. Look at the Arab nationalists have been hoping for a victory over Israel since 1967. And they've fallen flat. And yeah, I know Hezbollah put up a good fight in 2006, and maybe fought the Israelis to a draw. But the fact is that after that, Hezbollah didn't fire a missile against Israel for years after. In fact, if I recall correctly, I think it was Islamic Jihad or someone else, fired a missile off against Israel after that war, and Hezbollah issued a statement saying, no, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. We weren't responsible. So the fact is that a military solution is completely impossible. And I think that the only possibility lies in the revolutionization of the entire Middle East, and that involves the democratization, socialization, better treatment for minorities. And the treatment of minorities in the Middle East, to me, is comparable to the treatment of minorities in the Tsarist Empire, at the turn of the century. And these are the political tasks. And I think that Hamas has done the diametric opposite. And we're seeing the beyond awful consequences.
But the U.S. would never allow that.
We've got
to never allow the Middle East and North Africa to develop all of
peacefully.
The talking points you're talking about. That's what happened originally. Libya was the most progressive African country on the continent, and NATO, literally U.S. and British, literally destroyed it and threw it into chaos. The same with Syria. They won't allow any kind of progress of that nature.
Yes,
and
yes,
and
yes,
it's not just the Middle East. It's Africa. It's South America.
yes,
Sorry.
yes. You're right. You're 110% correct. Which is why the defeat of U.S. imperialism is the paramount task. You're
Uh,
you're
I,
you're 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 absolutely correct. I mean, I didn't disagree with hardly a single word. Your characterization of the Libyan regime was a little bit too favorable from my point of view. But nonetheless, though, I think you're basically on the right track. But the paramount task is the overthrow of U.S. imperialism. Um, and by the way, the Muslim Brotherhood, of which Hamas is a part, has been on the side of U.S. imperialism repeatedly.
yes, in Egypt back in the
In
day.
Egypt,
Yeah.
yes, they attacked communists. They tried to assassinate Nasser. They sided with the U.S. in Syria.
A puppet can cut its strings, though, Daniel. It's happened before.
Hmm.
Yes, well, I'm not actually aware of any examples, but
Let's look at Chechnya. I mean,
I await your elucidation, certainly.
I'm talking about Chechnya. You know, that was the weaponized Wahhabi fundamentalism imported from the Saudis, right?
Yeah.
Saying we're going to be independent. They got smashed, and then Putin sat down with Akhmat Kadyrov, and basically they're the heroes of Russia, one of the main centers of development. Basically, that's so. I think puppets can, but I'm sorry to be the contrarian, but to push back just a little bit, okay?
Even Saudi Arabia, they're entertaining, who came over and it got a lot of fanfare, and then while they were snubbing Biden, so there's this growing multipolarism, and I mean that's the main driver of anti-U.S. imperialism is the growth of China, the growth of Russia. So on the global stage, if we're gonna be supporting anti-imperialism and saying the first thing we got to deal with is U.S. hegemony, well, we got to support Russia, we got to support China. I mean, that seems basic, but I know Daniel, you have different takes, and so
exactly where I wanted to take that. But go ahead, Daniel. I'll follow up.
Yes, well, I think this is a basic area of disagreement.
Okay.
I don't view the Russian regime in the same way. I don't quite view the Chinese regime in the same way. I view Russia and China differently, but I don't think that Russia certainly is anti-imperialist in any fundamental sense. Yes, Russia is locked in a war with a U.S. imperial proxy, no doubt about that, and really with U.S. imperialism itself. So I don't quarrel with that, but I don't think Putin politically is an anti-imperialist. I think Putin would be very happy to sit down and reach an agreement with the United States, and he's probably hoping that if Trump gets in, he'll be able to do that. I think the Chinese would be happy to. I've got a problem here. I think it's starting to rain. And I didn't count on this. I guess I gotta pack my laptop up. I can't afford to sacrifice.
Go ahead.
As much as I would like to. If you can hold on for a few minutes, I can find some shelter and resume the conversation.
Yeah. No, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
If you're able to.
Yeah, give me 5 minutes, please.
Okay, no problem.
We'll pull you off screen for a second, and we'll put you right back as you signal your return. Is that okay? Okay.
So, I mean, that's interesting.
Rarely do we have a guest. I'm sorry that he's not here to address it. That I fundamentally disagree with every word so far.
I thought Billy Bob took the conversation to where I was going to go, and
same.
Ben was going to go. I was, as we talked though, I wanted to touch upon that Tet Offensive analogy, and of course, there's differences between Hamas and North Vietnamese. I mean, they not only had the Viet Cong, who had infiltrated the South, but they had all of the north of the country, and the Viet Minh and this tremendous power. But they did lose 3 million people. That would include Cambodia and Laos and the Pathet Lao. But they lost 3 million people in the struggle to unite the North and the South. So
And one.
what's 30,000 or 40,000 or 50,000 compared to 3 million? And after the Tet Offensive, the bombing increased. The U.S. bombing campaign got really hellacious. I mean, more ordnance than all the theaters in World War II. So, and there was a huge anti imperialist element in all around the world that was rising up in support of North Vietnam.
Yes.
So those analogies, they hold.
I thought it holds. Yeah, it holds very well, that analogy, as in October 7 being.
To a certain point. I mean, obviously, Gaza doesn't have the power that the North Vietnamese generated, nor do they have. I mean, given what they did, which was remarkable, nor do they have the guile. I mean, the North Vietnamese, they were, and the Viet Cong, they were famous for their tunnels. I mean, but they took one look at me and they said, 5'4", 120 pounds, you're going to go to the tunnels at Cu Chi. I said, fuck you. I'm not doing that.
I recently saw something like that. It's like one of those ant farms, but showing the Vietnamese tunnel system and tunnel warfare. They invented this stuff, that Hamas is doing, like really, really cool stuff down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to take, but I'll wait for Dan to return. But yeah, I have some things.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with this fundamental. It's
an interesting discussion, and I'm trying to think in my head, like, what exactly is the best avenue to explore when he returns. It's interesting, and I like disagreement, but I'm kind of at a loss to know exactly where to take it. I'll
mention Wang Yi's recent statement that this is an affront to humanity. The Holocaust in Gaza. That is Wang Yi. That is the number one diplomatic power as agreed by the West. And Dan's back on screen. Yes. Hello.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention to you, basically, glad you're back, great timing, is it recently emerged this diplomatic index that the soft power, as in the number one diplomatic power in the world, is China. And you've probably heard that very recently Wang Yi, the foreign minister, said that the entire Gaza Holocaust, well, he didn't call it that, but the genocide is an affront to humanity and cannot be suffered. There's a gross 75-year-old injustice here. That's changed. And of course, the other power, the military power of the world, as is now obvious in Ukraine, is Russia. And diplomatically, they had a very special relationship with different reasons. They look quite divorced now. You constantly say, and you're right, that there is no military solution. But I think Hamas, the resistance, even Iran knows that. And what would you say to someone who said they are not looking for a military solution, rather a political one, which is the exit of U.S. imperialism from the region? I mean, what Iran called from day one was a complete embargo and cessation of diplomatic relations with Israel to freeze it the hell out. And, the two big shipping companies, not companies, but big nations that can ship freely through the Red Sea are Russia and China, which I think shows a lot of foresight and good planning as opposed to a catastrophe that you described.
Well, I think since 1980, since January 1980, with the enunciation of the Carter Doctrine, written by Zbigniew Brzezinski, the U.S. has made control of the Persian Gulf and its energy resources a top political priority. I think my own back of the envelope calculations indicate the U.S. has spent somewhere around $20 trillion since the mid 1970s, invested that in militarizing the Persian Gulf. I mean, there are huge military bases in Bahrain and
Qatar, I think.
And the U.S. is not going to abandon that, other than in extreme crisis. And I don't see that anything like that happening soon. I think that China and Russia are nowhere inclined to exert the kind of force that would be required. And by the way, we're talking about a global war. I mean, if Russia
Oh yeah,
and China,
I'm not
if
talking
Russia and
about force. I'm specifically talking about diplomacy, politics is
but
what's going on
the
largely.
U.S. will never pull out of the Persian Gulf through mere diplomacy. It'll never happen. I mean, barring revolution at home, it'll never happen.
What could happen is what Marco Rubio lamented was the fact that they're going to develop other economic networks around the globe, and the U.S. won't have the power to inflict its economic embargoes, or they can, and nobody will care because there'll be another option on the global stage that doesn't involve the U.S., the SWIFT system. So you were saying that you were not happy with Russia and China because they'd probably be willing to live in peace with the United States. And like, to me, I would think that they need to live in, like, the United States should allow them to live in peace with China, live in peace with Russia, and that would be a good thing. That would be a big improvement over the reality, which is U.S. dominated imperialism not being okay, not controlling those countries' governments and the resources, that they have. So the U.S. wants control of that, and so China's resisting, the U.S.'s efforts to dominate their society and dictate to them what they're going to do. And the same is true with Russia. Russia has all these natural resources, and the West isn't going to stop unless they can control that oil, etc. I mean, all kinds of natural resources. So I think Putin wanted to work and live in peace and economic prosperity with the West, of course. And so does Xi in China. What's wrong with trade? What's wrong with this liberal world that the West pretended to champion, but they don't really champion it because they're imperialists. They're capitalists.
Yes.
So again, I support China.
So what are we arguing about?
There's things we are in complete agreement on, but to add some topical news to that, Tehran, it was the most sanctioned place on earth, basically above North Korea. Now Russia takes the crown. Just ordered 790 something metro trains from Beijing, meaning they are sanction proof in this economic corridor. The same goes for Russia. Now North Korea also sanctioned to hell. Yeah. And
we're going to see the development of North Korea. We're going to see the development of Iran, and the U.S. really can't do anything about it. And that's really great for humanity. And we're seeing a shift in the reality, a progressive shift where the U.S. is not able to inflict pain on entire societies like they've been doing for the last 75 years. So I support that, and I definitely support the leaders of those countries that are doing the most work to achieve that.
I agree that U.S. imperialism must be overcome, and I agree that if Russia and China are able to do workarounds, that is fantastic.
We agree.
If they're able to escape this oppressive U.S. hegemony, then that's fantastic. But the U.S. is still going to be an imperialist force. It still rules large portions of the globe, and it has concentrated its forces on the Persian Gulf since 1980, and I don't see it remotely leaving that region without a fight. And I see the Palestinian-Israeli conflict as essentially an outgrowth of that. I mean, this is the reason for the U.S.-Israeli alliance. The U.S. is not going to abandon an alliance with the preeminent military power in the region, and what is an ever more preeminent military power.
Ever more.
Yeah. So that's why.
Wait, Israel's might is increasing right now, as in militarily.
I think that Israel's power vis-a-vis the rest of the Middle East has increased dramatically over the last 50 years.
They're entirely dependent on the U.S., right? They couldn't maintain their existence if it wasn't for the U.S. This genocide couldn't continue if we didn't ship them weapons.
Even the Merkava tank is basically subsidized by the U.S., the entire arms industry.
I understand that Iran is not interested right now in starting a large regional war because time is on their side. Same with Hezbollah. time is on their side. So I don't see their reluctance to initiate a wider war right now as weakness. Far from it. Like I'm not sure that's accurate analysis, but
the Iranian war regime is weak. It's tremendously weak. It just suffered through months of demonstrations. The parliamentary elections were boycotted. And by the way, the
turnout was exactly the same as the last elections. I've seen the Western headlines saying there's a big boycott, women's right, all that, but the numbers don't back that.
41% turnout is good.
Exactly the same as last time. Yes.
Well, that to me that's a huge protest.
Well, to me, it marks a failed color revolution, is what it marks to me.
Well, it is a failed color revolution, but if there was a 41% turnout in the U.S. presidential election, that'd be pretty damn significant, right?
Yeah, that would be low. I say in the U.S., absolutely.
It's usually not much higher, is it?
No, it's higher. It's 60-odd% usually.
Okay.
Let me interject this.
Not for Parliament or not for Congress, but for sure for President.
Presidents, yeah. Go ahead, Carlo.
But let me interject a joke. The U.S. has achieved energy independence. That's all I'm hearing from all the experts. They have energy independence. Why do they need to screw up the Middle East? For
big headline this week, yeah.
That actually is a question that is very important and one I have pondered at great length. And the answer clearly is that the U.S., even though it is energy independent thanks to the fracking revolution, it regards the Persian Gulf as the key to the control of the entire global economy. And that is why it is determined to keep its hands on it and keep everyone's hands off, and why it has sworn eternal enmity to Iran. This is quite clear. I think it really is curious because the U.S. really has no need for those resources, but it needs those resources because it knows that other people need those resources, and therefore it's determined.
Other people. I was going to interject. What do you think? This is pure speculation on my part, but if you introduce Europe into this equation, do you think it factors in Washington? Because this whole thing is really screwing with Europe at the moment.
Yeah, well, it does factor in. Yeah, I mean, Nord Stream is an event of huge importance. It's astonishing the degree to which the Europeans have closed their eyes to it. Really amazing. There was the Danish investigation that was closed, and all they concluded was an act of sabotage.
We don't know. It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. Yeah, who knows who did it right? There's a body with a knife protruding from the back, and all we can conclude is that someone stabbed somebody. That's all we know. It's incredible. But no. I mean, NATO is in big trouble, and Europe is in political crisis. But bear in mind that forces like Geert Wilders, Wilders in Holland is a Kahanist.
And I think this week there was a headline that he actually isn't going to be president. So there's a coalition forming around him, but not including him.
He's a prime minister, by the way.
Prime minister. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No problem. And yes, but he still is a huge power. Whether he's prime minister or not, whether he's in the center or a little bit off to the right is kind of a secondary question. He's a major power player in Dutch politics. And so in any case, and he's a Kahanist. For your listeners, when I use the term Kahanist, it refers to Rabbi Meir Kahane, who was the founder of the Jewish Defense League here in New York, and went on to emigrated to Israel, founded an outrightly fascist party called Kach, K-A-C-H, that was so right-wing it was actually banned from the Israeli parliament. But now, two Kahanists are in the government. And according to an article in Haaretz a couple of weeks ago, written by an ex-Israeli prime minister named Ehud Omer, they are breathing down Netanyahu's neck. They are in a bid for power. So there's a Geert Wilders, a Ben-Gvir Smotrich coalition, a Donald Trump coalition.
Let's not forget Benny Gantz, the damned Hungarian, also very much in cahoots with Netanyahu. They look like rivals, but he went to Washington in this secret trip. You probably know.
And also, by the way, Viktor Orban is a player in this.
My president.
Yeah,
my prime minister.
Yeah, I don't mean to single you out, Ben. So
we get it from everywhere in Europe. We get it all the time.
Yeah, of course. And so this bodes extremely ill. So I wouldn't count on the Europeans rushing to the Palestinian side. Quite the contrary. I see the ascendance of fiercely anti-Muslim, right-wing, pro-Zionist forces in Europe, which just underscores my point. We got to fight this politically through an international mass working class action. That militarily, it's a complete dead end.
Can I take this in kind of a propaganda direction? Because you probably know the mighty Wurlitzer. I think that was an FBI or a CIA head who said that basically, the US has the soft power in the world, and they are mighty, really, really strong. But you might remember a couple of weeks before 10/7, before October, Netanyahu was at the UN showing his new map of the Middle East, and there was no Palestine on it.
Yeah.
It was just Israel, and the gas is going to go that way, and then there's going to be shipping lanes and train tracks and all that. And then 10/7 happened. And ever since then, this myth of, most moral army, undefeatable army, it's all self-defense. For most of the world's population, even though there are some very bad comprador leaders, even in the Gulf, for the most of the world's population, in Europe, even in Hungary, we have very big protests in Budapest from time to time, not as often as other European capitals. But that in itself, do you think that's at least a victory or not?
Well, it's certainly a change. It certainly is a victory on some level, I suppose. I mean, I don't think it's worth 38,000 deaths and something like 100,000 injuries, but certainly it's a victory on some level. So I guess I agree. Yeah, but
it's mirroring. I just want to bring in quickly Emmanuel Macron make his big address yesterday, urgent message to the voters to France. And he said, if we lose, or if Russia wins in Ukraine, the credibility of Europe will be zero. That's verbatim quote from him. And I see very much the same of, US aircraft carriers. The B-2 bombers, we will flatten anybody who stands against Israel, being uncredible after all the last couple of months.
Yes. I think you raised two. There are two important points here. One is that I think the political situation in the U.S. is increasingly unstable, and I think that I do expect Trump to win in November, and I expect that the political crisis here in America, which by the way I've written extensively about, will intensify as a consequence.
Let us know. What do you think? What do you think will it turn into? Because I think we all agree Trump is going to be re-elected at this point. But what do you think comes next? I'm very interested.
Well, I think we'll see mass repressive actions. I think we'll see the victory by a coup d'etat leader. I mean, I think essentially it's a body blow to American democracy, such as it is. As weak and pitiful as it is, I think we could very well see mass roundups of illegal immigrants. We could see the creation.
As opposed to now, yeah.
Well, there have not been mass roundups. I mean,
Trump had 4 years. Is it going to be different than his first 4 years?
He has, by all indications, yes. This time he's serious. By all indications, yes. I think that Trump 2.0 will be a much fiercer version than Trump 1.0. So I think we could very well see the mass roundup of illegal aliens. We could see concentration camps. We could see emergency measures against workers. I think the U.S. is heading into a real crunch. I think the crisis is quite severe. I think I'm not a defeatist because I think that it opens up immense possibilities for the left. But I think the seriousness of the crisis cannot be overestimated. And then also I want to point out Israel. I mean, I do agree that the weakness of Israel has been shown, and I think that long range, Israel's military situation is grim. I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, I think they're moving to some kind of ethnic cleansing, ethnic cleansing on a completely unprecedented scale. Now, so what will happen? Will they expel 2.3 million people, whatever it is, to the Sinai, and 3.7 million to Jordan?
Well, and the IMF seems to be functioning somewhat as a middleman here, because they've issued loans to Egypt and Jordan recently.
Yeah, well, okay, fine. Number one, it's hugely expensive. Number two, those will become Hamas strongholds. And number three, then what will Israel do? Send in the F-16s on a daily basis to bomb millions of refugees? Is that what is that what the next 100 years holds? I think militarily Israel is facing a grim situation as well, but one that will likely drive it to even greater and more dangerous extremes. I think things are really this is really a disaster that has befallen us, and I am eager to try to find some kind of constructive way out of this that involves a victory for the left.
So are we.
Yes.
At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that U.S. is just not going to get out of the Persian Gulf, the Middle East, the West African region without a huge crisis. But just now, you mentioned that Donald Trump's re-election, could that be that kind of huge crisis, or is it not big enough?
I see Trump as a Kahanist also.
To make a joke, do you think it's the funny here? It's every continent has one. We have Geert Wilders. We also have Boris Johnson. Now there's Milei in Latin America, and there's Trump.
I think you're onto something there. Yeah, the funny thing is that Mara Kahani and Donald Trump are both from Queens. I don't know if you know, that's a neighborhood. It's a borough here in New York. Yeah, mm-hmm. I see them as basically simpatico. I think that Trump will be more emphatically pro-Zionist than Joe Biden.
Unfortunately, I agree. Yeah.
And so look, I guess it was Billy Bob brought up the question of reality. We're all pro-reality. We all believe that reality must be stared straight in the face, no matter how awful it is. Mm. And I think that's what we've got to do here. We've got to face facts that the situation is really grim. There are no easy solutions, and that we are facing a real struggle. We're entering into a period of war and depression. I think the economy, by the way, is also showing signs of overheating, and I don't know where that will end up. But I think we could very easily be entering into a period of economic rockiness as well.
I mean, just the debt alone. Sorry, Billy Bob, go.
Well, I was going to say the driver of this, growing war, warmongering and outright war, I think is the driving factor is that the U.S. imperial network is just it's under threat. It's weakening, and so they're lashing out. Doing their best to, have this proxy war in Ukraine to weaken Russia that didn't turn out very well. That's not going how they wanted it to go. It's making Russia stronger. Their economy is stronger. Their military is stronger. And now they want to use, either the Philippines or Taiwan as the next Ukraine against China. And that's going to just accelerate their own decline. So I see things, and I'm very optimistic. I'm very glad to be alive right now because we're seeing shifts in the world order that are going to be beneficial for humanity. And so, the U.S. isn't going to be able to support Israel. They're not going to be able to, keep supporting Taiwan. Like, these things are gonna give way eventually, and they're just going to accelerate it by these adventures that they're engaged in.
Well, I mean, British hegemony slipped in 1914, and what happened? What happened then?
Well, yeah.
Well, what happened
Ferdinand.
then was the
Ferdinand
capitalists
was.
got together and they developed these fascist powers to go after the heart of communism because that's what they felt was the most threatening to their interests. So, and also that didn't work out exactly how they had hoped to. It worked out great for the United States, not so great for Britain.
So
But
I just want.
So,
I just
so,
want
so
to.
not, as I said, 1914 ushered in 30 years of war, and war on a scale the world had never seen. So I think the overthrow of U.S. hegemony is to be welcomed and fought for, but I think it's not going to be a peaceful process.
But why it's not going to be peaceful? Because the U.S. is going to, go on the attack.
Yes.
But who do we blame for that, Daniel?
Oh, I agree with you.
We don't blame the Russians. We don't blame Hamas. We blame the U.S.
Well, I do blame the U.S. for that. Absolutely correct. U.S. imperialism is a world a destructive force of global proportions, and we haven't even discussed global warming yet. So I agree with you, and I agree that Hamas's sins, while considerable, pale in significance, pale in comparison. So I'm with you.
May I make a counterpoint?
Carlo was trying to get in.
I'm sorry. Go, Carlo.
We just sailed right past this, but I agree with Dan on the fact of Trump incarcerating people, because we have a history of that called Rex 84 Night Train. And under Rex 84 Night Train, Oliver North was Colonel, Contra figure. Colonel Oliver North was given the job of setting up camps to arrest people who were supporting the Sandinistas, and those camps are still functioning. They're in Colorado and the western states, and the project was called Rex 84 Night Train.
But Daniel, you're talking about camps for illegal immigrants, for undocumented people. That's what you're referring to. Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting. I know we've always had camps for undocumented. We've always had children's in cages under Obama, under Clinton. That's nothing new, but you just think it'll be expanded and put on steroids under Trump?
Yes, and Republicans are actually discussing this. Okay. I'm not just speculating. I'm not engaging in conspiracy theories. I'm simply saying that there have actually been reported discussions of this question. They are committed to taking drastic action to solve the alien, the immigration problem, which of course is 9/10 caused by the U.S. itself. I think we should brace ourselves. I think it's going to be quite serious.
Trump's definitely a mixed bag on the policy. I think vis-a-vis Russia, he would be much better than the status quo. I think he would be very eager to negotiate some kind of a ceasefire, some kind of a deal with Russia where we stop, supporting Ukraine, stop giving them weapons and encouraging them to fight to the last Ukrainian. I think Trump would put an end to that. With China, he's a little bit more hawkish economically, but I think he'd cut a deal. He'd be happy to cut a deal, and the Chinese would too. You're right. He's an anti-immigrant. He's a nativist. But I think overall, as far as he would be bad for the empire, he would be a nitwit ruler over the empire, and the empire would suffer as a result. And I think it's good to weaken and have this empire suffer, because we all agree that that's the number one contradiction right now is U.S. Western imperialism is the number one problem, and all other problems flow out of that problem. And that's why I'm a big supporter of Iran, Russia, Venezuela, China, North Korea. I mean, God bless those countries for not succumbing and for resisting imperialist hegemony.
Look.
Wait, yeah. Carlo's
Look, let me just say one thing about Trump is not his own man. I don't care what his image is. He's not his own man. He doesn't know anything.
Bannon
he
alert.
has to respond to the people around him. So we don't know where that's going to go. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I was going to point out that Trump is also an Islamophobe.
A Zionist. Every candidate is a Zionist.
Well, yeah, but he's also not only a Zionist, he's also specifically, motivated by a very strong anti-Islamic impulse. So therefore, that's not good news for the
He
Middle
went
East.
over to Saudi Arabia. He was hanging out with them.
Yeah, they paid him bribes. Yeah, his first loyalty is to his pocketbook. Yeah, his first loyalty is to his pocketbook.
Yeah, I see him as a chaos.
His son-in-law's father was a big developer of the illegal settlements, right? Kushner's dad was a big settlement developer.
I don't know about that. This sounds
his daughter, of course, took on the religion of Judaism. But I am 99.99% certain that Jared Kushner's father was a big real estate developer in the illegal settlements. But
okay, that may be so. I have no idea. I know that Kushner's father was a committed Zionist. In fact, I believe that Netanyahu stayed in their home in New Jersey when he made a visit to the U.S. at some point. I think it was in the 80s. I'm not positive. So they actually have personal ties to Netanyahu. But I think that Trump is very serious, and I think as a very serious, we're facing a very serious problem, and one that the left has got to rise up to, and that doesn't mean forming alliances with Democrats, the capital D, by the way.
Blue MAGA, yeah, I agree with you on that point again. Just a bit of a bigger picture. I mean, you've probably read that every 100 days the U.S. debt increases by $1 trillion, and that should be a headline every day. I mean, I don't see very, very good things for the population of the U.S. at all. But looking at the global scene of empire, there was a leaked Navy report, and this is from the Eurasia Times. Here's how the headline goes. 230 times greater than the U.S. Navy, China's shipbuilding capacity eclipses the might of the U.S. This was last September, 2023. Okay, and now they're going to Japan and going to Australia to maybe build some ships. The latest nuclear sub that they wanted, they just delayed it to the 2040s. We are looking, I think, at increasing incapacity to do what they wanted. And I don't underestimate the stupidity of some leaders, lob a nuke or just start something over Taiwan. But it looks more and more unfeasible as the days go past. And I'm hoping, just this might be naive or Pollyanna-ish on my part, that there's someone, a bit of a realist head in Washington, while Russia, China, the BRICS 10, they simply rise past it. Of course, I can't rule out conflict. Nobody can. But do you see an option where they say, well, shit, it's just too late?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's possible to imagine that Trump's historical mission is to downsize the U.S. empire, to retreat to more defensible boundaries.
Oh, if he got out of Europe and NATO, I would vote for him just for that.
Well, I wouldn't vote for him, but nonetheless, I mean, I do think that is his. I think that one could argue that is his historical mission, but I must emphasize this process will not be smooth and peaceful. I mean, all of history tells us the opposite. And speaking purely personally, I mean, Trump is such a volatile personality that just adds to the explosiveness of the situation. But the transition, the downscaling, the retreat of U.S. imperialism, this is not going to happen peacefully. It's going to open up paradoxically, it'll open up a new era of war and depression.
Well, that's not very happy.
It's a positive outlook.
Well, no, but I think it is. I think it is positive. I mean, I think it's positive because it shows that the bourgeoisie is cracking, that its control is slipping, that its mastery of the global situation is not what it was 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah,
exactly.
And this is a very important opening. And there are other things as well. I mean, I was looking at the figures a few weeks ago. The size of the international proletariat, the workforce that engaged in capitalist production has more than tripled and probably quadrupled since 1980. Thanks to the internet, thanks to shows like this. I mean, there is an unprecedented degree of international political unity, and global warming. I mean, terrible as it has one good side, and that is it concentrates the mind, the collective mind of the international proletariat on the problem of industrial production. How to manage it, how to manage industrial production for the benefit of all humanity, and in a way which doesn't cause us to, to fry, as temperatures remorselessly climb. And this is a great industrial, endeavor that the world has got to engage in collectively, that the world's socialist community has got to engage in collectively, and it's an opportunity. I don't know who was it who said, never let a crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity.
In disguise, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is an example. So I am fundamentally optimistic, but I just think that we've got to face facts that this process is not going to be smooth or easy.
And it's entirely up to the United States. Essentially, it's their decision on how they manage their own decline, and they will be responsible. They will be the responsible party for any economic pain, any lives lost. Like they will be to blame.
But who is they? Not the American working class, right?
Definitely not.
So a tiny coterie of hedge fund managers and bankers and et cetera, are responsible for this debacle, but certainly not the American working class. In fact,
right.
Let me say that I think that the centrality of the American proletariat has never been greater. I mean, I really think that America is where the big battles lie, and that the American working class is the key to the global situation. And I would go so far as to also emphasize that the Israeli working class is the key to the Middle Eastern situation.
You have to say something I don't agree with, but otherwise it was.
I just want to interject. I kind of disagree with that, especially when it comes to manufacturing, because the way the elite have set up the economic culture is pork goes everywhere, and pork filters down to jobs for the American working class, and as I've said a number of times, I show my daughter works for the UAW. She's a lawyer, an attorney, and she can demonstrably show where job protection and that originates in Congress is very important in the way that they vote, the way that they see the world. And the way that they react to what policies are put in place.
But the UAW is not synonymous with the American working class. I mean, the UAW is its political leadership is pro-capitalist.
Yeah, I know,
but same as every union in Britain. Yeah,
the entire military-industrial complex is pork.
Yeah, you mean, and you mean pork in the metaphorical sense, not in the actual.
I mean, in the political sense.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a piece of the.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you mean by pork.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Actually, in the 19th century, politicians actually went around with pork barrels and passed out dry, salted pork to political.
Oh, there's
supporters.
A history of this.
So I understand. Anyway, so no, I agree. The American political state is very powerful. American politics are in crisis, but they are in crisis, and the constitutional system is falling apart here,
cool.
and that creates openings. Listen. 50 years ago, we never would have been saying this. 50 years ago, America seemed to be rock solid. Everyone believed in America. Everyone, put their hand over their heart as they pledged allegiance. Everyone assured the U.S. Constitution was this sacred document. They believed in it as fervently as medieval Europeans believed in the Holy Bible. But now even that's being questioned. So big things are happening. Very important things are happening.
I don't know how much more time you have, but you've been very generous. I'd just like to get one more question in, because on the information front and propaganda front, you've probably read that the TikTok ban or sell thing has gone through Congress. So it's 6 months.
So only through the House, not through the Senate.
Oh, only through the House. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, because as you said, we have these alternative views, these shows, TikTok, social media, all that. It seems to me like they've lost control of the narrative.
Yeah.
And it looks like a very, very desperate and I think impossible step to just keep trying to grab at straws and keep a false narrative alive. I see that as a good sign, but perhaps you do too. But your opinion?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and the narrative centers around Israel. That's what they're so upset about.
Oh, the leaked phone call. What, the ADL CEO, right? We have a TikTok problem.
Yeah, and that's the source of the source of a great deal of the animus, if not all of it. So yeah, that's very important. Yeah, they're losing control. The system is cracking. This American monolith is no longer so monolithic. I mean, even the Constitution is coming under question. I wrote a book about the U.S. Constitution called The Frozen Republic. It did actually pretty well, but when I was invited on talk shows, people would look at me like I was crazy. One guy burst out into laughter.
How could you question that supreme, holy document, Daniel?
My God!
But that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, no, I hear you. People are wising up, and you've done great work on that. And I've read a lot of your articles. It's resulted in gridlock and an absolute incapacity for progressive change. And I think kind of that might be by design, right? Like they'll follow the Constitution when it benefits them. When it doesn't, they don't. But it's a rudimentary document. It needs to be revised, and there's all kinds of problems that you have succinctly pointed out, no doubt. You've given a pass to American workers. Carlo does not. Carlo does not give a pass to American workers.
Ninny alerts.
He calls them ninnies, and he expects more from them. He wants more from them.
They know nothing. They know nothing.
But millions of people are crossing the Rio Grande in order to enter the American proletariat.
Yeah, but
these people are very important. They are politically tremendously important.
But I have a solution for the immigrant problem that I posed to
it's a good
Judge
one.
Napolitano and Doug McGregor. I said, look, you want to stop immigration? Stop fucking up the rest of the world.
I totally agree.
True. Same goes for Europe, by the way, and North Africa. Stop destroying them.
I am with you 100%. But the fact is, we have massive immigration, and that is politically very important. And those people are going to becoming a vital sector of the American working class. And I'm happy to have them.
But they're not any more well informed than the people that live here. I live in a community that's mostly African American and Latino, and they, the African Americans have a certain savvy because they've had to live in this culture, and they gotta play the games. But the Latino people, they're all evangelicals. They're all clueless.
Oh, come on, that's not right. That's not right.
I mean, you can have a beer with them and eat their food at a barbecue or something, but they don't know anything about international politics.
But Americans in general don't know anything about international politics.
That's my point.
Well, yeah, someone said America is a country, bounded by insignificant powers to the north and south and fishes to the east and west. It's a great island state. It's Great Britain raised to the nth degree. There's a famous British historian named Louis Namir, who once said that 9/10 of British history can be explained by the fact that Britain is an island. And in America, America is a huge continental island, completely militarily secure with no enemies to worry about whatsoever.
Sarmat disagrees, but go ahead. Sarmat is the hypersonic, ballistic missile that Russia has developed.
Most countries would envy. Most countries envy America's geopolitical position.
30 years ago, they did. Yeah.
Okay. But in any case, my point is that Americans are very isolated. It's a big country off by itself. They've got a very skewed view of the world, but that's changing. That's changing. I mean, people learn. I mean, if you study history, I mean, history is the most progressive science because what it shows over and over again is humanity, after making countless mistakes, eventually rising up and overcoming these barriers. And I am critically optimistic that humanity can do it again.
Well, I want to make another point, though. I mean, you talk about the American working class and you talk about immigration. Well, much of Trump's popularity resides in the fact that he's so anti-immigrant among the American working class. Pure and simple racism and xenophobia. Pure and simple.
I don't want to minimize the political problems we face. There's no question about it.
Defend Trump, Daniel. Defend Trump. Just kidding.
But I also would not exaggerate the racism of the American working class. America is simultaneously the most racist and the most anti-racist nation on earth.
Yeah,
that's
an interesting conundrum right there. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that's it.
America is where the anti-slavery movement was invented. Even as slavery was growing by leaps and bounds, I think the correct date is 1686, where a Mennonite congregation in Pennsylvania passed the first abolitionist resolution in recorded history. So right here in the U.S. So it wasn't the U.S. then, of course. So America has a history of vicious racism and a history of heroic anti-racism. So these are the seeds of the American Revolution. Anyway, I do have to go. I think
that was a great end note. I want to thank you for your time. And, we might not agree on the solutions. I'm certainly not fourth international guy myself, but we all agree there is a crisis. And as you said, critical optimism. I really like that phrase. So, Dan Lazar, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. We hope our disagreement wasn't too disagreeable. We would love to have you back, and we appreciate your views.
Yes, very much so.
Any less disagreement would have been disagreeable. I welcome a good debate.
All right, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See everybody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Well,
Billy Bob. You might want to march us out.
So, the comments, some complaining about his views, but, we're about tolerance and hearing other views. And I like to disagree because we have these agreement fests and it kind of gets boring, honestly. So I like to be stimulated mentally with some disagreements and thinking how to respond to these things that I don't agree with. So, just bear with us, viewers. A little disagreement can be good. You don't have to agree with everything our guests say or our hosts for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, imagine being me. Stalin is one of my greatest heroes. Just to talk to a trot, it's challenging, but it's for the show, guys.
I thought about that.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you. That was gonna be my last question. Was Stalin the great or the greatest? Those were going to be his two options.
Good. I mean, I didn't want to leave him with a bomb, but yeah, it would have been a good final note. So. All right, guess we're back to normal programming, Billy Bob, now?
Yes, I am off of assignment. I was in a sunny Caribbean location, as you can tell from my tan. But yeah, no, I've got a lot of people interested in being guests. So I'm excited about that. I'm not going to name names just yet, but hopefully we'll be back on Tuesday with some more excellent guests. And Ian was supposed to join us today. He's kind of like a regular. Hopefully he's okay. Just a few hours ago, he said he was going to be here. So I'll catch up with him, but he'll probably be back to join us on Tuesday, hopefully.
Okay. Good.
Have a great weekend, everybody. And I guess. Thank you. By the way, all the naughty comments that disagree with our guests, I completely agree with those comments, but
Oh, okay.
All right. I'll see you next